Today is a technique video all about shirring. This is a beautiful detail that you see sprinkled in some designs here and there. Could be at the waist, in different areas. And today is all about how to do it. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingthingsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and this video is about shirring. Now, if you don't know what it is, it's basically just using your same sewing machine as usual, but instead of using a regular thread in your bobbin, you're using an elastic thread in your bobbin. As you sew, this elastic stretches and comes back. Then it gives you this beautiful effect where you can stretch your fabric, where the fabric shrinks basically to like half of what it was lengthwise, and all the rows end up looking super beautiful. This is a detail that you might see in waistband areas, maybe in wrists, sometimes around the shoulders. I've even seen some necklines that have some shirring. Can be at the back, flat front elasticated back features, lots of ways. And recently I was sewing a garment that had a flat front elasticated back, and the elasticated back feature was done with shirring. And I thought, why don't I just make the video about shirring, because I have sprinkled this here and there, but I don't have a separate video about it for you, which I always think is super helpful because it's its own topic. You can come to it, see all about it without having to look for it, mixed in there with pattern reviews and some of the patterns where I have done some shirring. Now, what this episode is not about is elastic thread brands. I'm going to use the one that I find here in Brazil. It's made here, it's local, it works, it's the one that everyone uses. I can sometimes find it in colors, mostly black and white, but I can find it in red and blue and other colors. You find your brand locally where you are and test it. What it's also not about is sewing machine issues. I have sometimes seen some posts on social media where someone has been struggling and trying to get shirring to work for them for hours on end, and the machine won't do it. The machine just does not do the shirring, even though they put the elastic thread on the bobbin and everything. I am no help for that because I'm not a technical machine person. If my machine has a little sneeze, I send it to the person that knows about machines because I don't know about machines. I don't know what to do with them when they don't work. So this is not about what if my machine doesn't do the shirring. At the end, I will show you a method that's called mock shirring, which will give you a very similar result, but it's not shirring. So if your machine does not want to do the shirring, just stick to the end and see the mock shirring version. That could solve your problem as well and give you a similar look. Now, just as a tidbit of general context here, I'm really picky about the styles that have shirring that I want to wear, that I can tolerate. And it's not because I don't like the look. I think the look is really pretty. It's because in the past I have had some garments that where the elastic just rubbing against my skin had actually torn my skin apart. I had scabs and blood, and the friction was just, I couldn't wait to get home and take that blouse off because I couldn't. I was out in public in a conference, so I had to endure that pain the whole day. And that taught me that I'm a bit sensitive to the elastic touching my skin, especially in the wrists and the midsection. I just can't do it. In other areas, it would be fine up here on the upper chest. That is absolutely fine. But yeah, that's why I won't wear styles where the shirring is going to go directly on my skin unless it's lined, or I do a trick where I do 2 layers and the shirring is double basically. You'll see that later on in the video. But that's just my thing. You know, don't worry, you might not have any issues with shirring. Now, another style that has a bodice that's completely shirred, it's like a tube. That's just aesthetically not what I like. So you'll never see me make a tutorial about that or show you how to make a dress like that because I just don't like that style. I would basically have to be forced to wear something like that, you know, under duress basically, because I just do not like it. So don't expect that type of content here in this video. I'm just making it clear. I am going to show you the general technique next, and what you're going to see at the beginning is me practicing different stitch lengths. I suggest you do that with shirring, especially if it's a new type of fabric you're going to try shirring on. In my case, most of my shirring has been done on 100% rayon. I would say 99% of my makes have been done using 100% rayon. So I pretty much know what stitch length is going to work best. But in the example that you're going to see, I'm going to use a longer stitch length and a shorter stitch length just to see how it feels. And then I'm going to do my shirred little piece. So let's see how to do it. Before I commit to the settings I'm going to use for my shirring, I just cut out 2 little rectangles, 2 of them, and I'm going to shirr these with a different stitch length just to see what I like best. For lightweight fabrics, it's been recommended that you use a shorter stitch length to get more shearing, which is the opposite that you do with a fabric that's heavier. So I'm going to test this one with 5.0 and I'm going to test this one with 3.5 and see what I like best, what I think looks nicer. I'm going to give it a nice little press as well. Once I've seen the final result on the same type of fabric, I'll choose what stitch length I want and then I'll shirr my big piece. This is the elastic thread I'm using. I have just hand wound this bobbin as neatly as I can, just like this. No tension at all. You know, there's so many ways to do this. It is your preference. This is how I've done it always. And I feel I can control this to not have any tension with my hands. If I put this on the machine, I feel that I lose that control. Although other people will feel that they have more control on the machine. So it's up to you. And then you're just going to put it through your machine like normal. There's nothing that you do different with your bobbin when you put it in the machine. I'm going to do the shirring every 3/8 of an inch apart approximately. And I have a 5.0 stitch length. So when you finish, just pull that you have enough of the thread here because it's going to want to shrink back inside and you don't want it to go back in that you have to thread the bottom again. So when you do the next one, you want to stretch this a little bit so that you start off clean and you don't start on like a pucker. So I've actually been sewing on the wrong side of the fabric. Of course, you would sew on the right side of the fabric, but this is just a test. You can see how much this is pulling it in. So I'll go ahead and finish this little rectangle and then I'll sew the other rectangle with a shorter stitch length, give them a press and compare them. I have my 2 little pieces. They don't end up being that difference in the width. This is a 3.5 stitch length and this is a 5-point stitch length. When I look at the wrong side, I like the look of the 3.5 better. I think the tension looks nicer. And also when you stretch it like this, it just feels a bit more firm than the one with the 5 stitch length. I'm going to commit and do my stitch length at 3.5, not the 5.0. And I really suggest you try on a piece to see what you like best because every fabric will look different. Even the elastic can make a difference, what brand you're using. I'm not sure what brand I'm using. So I wouldn't just go ahead and do the shirring on your final piece for your garment without testing a little bit to see what you like better. And I think this one with the shorter stitch length has a nicer tension here than this one over here. Although they do look similar, they feel different. I do have my piece that I'm going to shirr now and I'm doing it with the right side of the fabric up. Of course, the elastic will be on the bottom. Hopefully you have an elastic color that matches the fabric that you're using. I think the white thread is good for this fabric. There's lots of straight seams. It'll be the same. It'll be quite a few rows to finish this whole piece. As I'm sewing, I'm just slightly spreading out the fabric underneath the previous row to clear out those gathers so they're not there when I sew over them. I don't want to be pulling or pushing with my hands and interfering with the feed dogs and the elastic on the bottom. I'm just moving, manipulating the fabric, but I'm not actually pulling it through the feed dogs. So I've got 3 rows done. It's looking nice. I think it's going to be super cute. Once you press it, this will sort of shrink a little bit more. And you always get a funny sound on the bobbin, like a squeaky sound. At least I get a different sound to what you're using with regular thread. Don't worry about that. To simplify my life, as you know, I did not make the marks on my fabric to sew on them at 3/8 of an inch apart. I use it a lot as a reference for 3/8 of an inch when I'm sewing anyway. So I think the space between my rows might be a 1/16 of an inch smaller than 3/8. I don't think it makes a difference, and I think this is a good distance to have them. I would not want to have them closer together or further apart than this. I think this width for this press-a-fort is just right. It's looking so cute so far. I love how these little stripe features shrink like that. That's why I chose to do the shirred version in this area of my border print. That's how it looks on the other side. It's looking quite neat. I still need to do quite a few more rows until I finish this. This time when I cut my thread, I didn't cut it long enough and it sort of went into there. I can't grab it with my hand, but you can use some tweezers and just help yourself with that and pull it out so you don't have to rethread it. If you have a machine that cuts your thread for you, which is not the case with mine, don't use it. Just do it by hand. Just pull it slightly by hand so you can control how this elastic will stretch. If you use the thread cutter, The machine will cut it as it would for regular thread, but it's not accounting for that this brings back in and stretches. So if you have that function in your machine, just don't use it. I've done quite a lot. I still have some there. I'm going to give this a good press. And when I press it, I just want to literally press it. I don't want to be stretching it or moving my iron around. All I want to do is add steam to it and literally just drop the iron, lift it and drop it, lift it and drop it like that. You don't want to be stretching this out and messing with it. I think it even reduced its size a little bit on the width. Just remember that your machine is your machine, mine is mine. This is what works with mine. And the longer stitch length or the shorter stitch length might be different for you. So that's why I did those little rectangles. I do not think it's a waste of your time to get this done and try it out for yourself to see what you like best, and then do your big piece. Because there's no worse thing than spending a long time doing lots and lots of rows of sewing and then you're not happy. It's better to just know from the get-go, from a tiny piece, that this is not what you like or it's what you like, and then you can continue and then you'll be happier with your project. So practice, practice. Now I can pretty much eyeball 3/8 of an inch with the presser foot as my guide. I'm probably never going to mark the lines I want to show with a pen, with a friction pen or something like that, because I can easily eyeball that. But if you feel that you're going to go crooked and it's going to go wonky, then just spend a few minutes with a ruler and a friction pen just marking your lines, and then you won't have anxiety over that. And then you can just sew, and then your shirring is going to turn out perfect. Now in this example where I showed you the technique with all the detail and everything, you see that I get a nice little panel that's shirred. This is for the ballad blouse from Love Notions that has a little piece here that's shirred. So after creating all that piece that's shirred, you put the pattern piece on top and then you cut it out and then you sew it onto the blouse. It turns out super pretty. And I've been asked before, you know, when you cut away the shape, you know, you're sort of cutting away at the stitches with the shirring. Does that come apart and unravel and get holes over time? I'm going to have to say no. It doesn't come apart, it doesn't unravel. Nothing's ever happened to the blouses I've made that have that technique at all. I just use a shorter stitch length to unite them to make sure there's a lot of stitching that's going to go into that area. Never had a problem at all. I'm going to show you how this was added onto a dress where there's a bodice, then there's a waistband, and there's a skirt. And on that waistband area on the back, this is where the shirring happened. So you can see how that looks. At the top of the waistband, it goes towards the bodice, and at the bottom of the waistband, it goes towards the skirt. Get it nice and pressed and neat. We can be ready to do some shirring here on this back waistband area. For the shirring, I'm using my elastic thread on the bobbin. I've wound it by hand without tension, just going around and around and around. That's the way it works for me. I've always done it like that. And then you just put this at the bottom like any other regular thread. Here on this area of the waistband, we're going to be doing some rows of shirring. I'm going to be guiding myself with the edge of my presser foot so that I can get them all nice and neat. So I've got the edge of my presser foot against the seam there that unites the waistband to the bodice right here. And I'm not going to start on the very edge. I'm going to start 1/2 inch in, so that the seam allowances are free for later. Here on this other side, also stop 1/2 inch before the edge. Make sure you put a nice amount of elastic thread underneath because it tends to bounce back. If you don't pull out enough, then you're left with a tiny amount. I've done the first one and now I'm going to keep going. This can take a while and it can be a little repetitive, but it's only a small area. So because I've already got one section shirred, I'm just keeping it nice and straight like this. Repeat and repeat. There are 7 rows of shirring that fit into this waistband. They are marked on the pattern. They're about 3/8 of an inch apart. Remember to stop always 1/2 inch before the edge with every single one of these rows. I finished the shirring and what I've done is just take a big needle and push the regular thread towards the back here. So you can see regular thread and the elastic thread. And for each of these rows that we did, we need to knot them so that this doesn't come out afterwards. 2 knots per row of shirring right here. You can see that all the edge here was left free from the shirring. So we're going to have a clean area to sew this later, a nice clean seam allowance. There are all the knots done, nice and neat. Seam allowance is free on this side and on this other side. Now something I don't show because it's extremely boring when you saw me do the shirring on this waistband area. It's straight. At the end you're going to have tons of thread left over. It's a hot mess. I go ahead and knot every single one. So my regular thread that's on the top, my elastic thread that's on the bobbin, I make 2 knots, I cut. I go to the next one, I cut. So if I've done like 7 rows of shirring, I have 14 knots to do. If I've done 30 rows of shirring, I have like 60 knots to do. So yeah, I mean, it's time consuming, but it'll be less messy than just cutting it off and just pretending it's not there. So just know that I am knotting. I'm not filming that, but I am knotting. This is actually the dress that you just saw. This is a fistera from Itch to Stitch. I'll just go back there and show you the details and show you what that shirring looks like on the back. This is my super cute fistera dress from Itch to Stitch. We have a bodice and a skirt with a flat waistband in between, which is really nice. But the way to get in it is through your head. There's basically 2 ways to get into a fitted bodice and dress like this. Zipper, or some other way like shirring at the back. And that's why the back waistband has all this shirt area there. I'll get closer and show you. Super comfortable. And the reason I decided to sew this dress was because it's lined. So this shirt area at the back has a second layer inside that is the same. So actually what's touching my skin is just fabric, and the elastic thread is wrong sides together with the 2 layers there. So very comfortable. It's never going to touch me. And that's why I love the application of the shirring here. It gives you the amount of waist ease that you need to pull it on over your head without needing a zipper, and it still gets you that fitted look. So thumbs up from me. When I first saw the lineup for this dress and I was going to do a pattern test, I saw the shirring at the back and I thought immediately, oh no, I can't do it. It's going to touch my skin. It's going to tear it apart, because that has happened to me with the elastic thread being in a single layer. Figured out that the dress is fully lined. The shirring area is double there. So all that elastic thread is touching itself wrong sides together, and there's no shirring elastic touching my skin. So perfect. The next dress that you see here is the Azores dress from Itch to Stitch. And this one also has shirring features at the waist all the way around. In this case, this dress is not lined. It's in a single layer, so the elastic would touch your skin. I made it for my sister-in-law because she has no issues with shirring. She can wear it and it can touch her midsection and there's no worries there. There's also a little bit of shirring at the wrists. It's a long sleeve, super pretty, super delicate detail. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's just that I can't take that single layer shirring rubbing against my skin. So that's why I didn't make this dress for myself. It's a beautiful way that shirring adds something extra to a dress, to add that waist ease, to let you pull that dress on without the zipper, while also bringing the waist in and giving you that waist definition, which is always super pretty. That dress I made for my sister-in-law is so beautiful. I knew that I was not going to make that dress for myself. I made it for her because shirring doesn't upset her. Now, one thing about adding this yourself, if it's not part of the pattern, if you think that's really cute and you have a pattern that's designed to be a bishop sleeve, for example, and you think, oh, I might just want to add shirring instead of the elastic casing and the elastic, just be careful, because shirring brings it in a lot. It's not like on a bishop sleeve where you have a casing, you can regulate the amount the elastic is going to end up in. If having something tight here upsets you, you might not be able to regulate that with the shirring as much as you think you are. So I wouldn't be that experimental. I know a lot of people would be. Maybe just try 2 or 3 rows of shirring just to see how that turns out, instead of doing the elastic with the elastic casing, and see if it's going to just strangle your wrist or not. Give it a go. But I would say I would never try this with a regular sleeve, because that circumference is just not wide enough to be able to do the technique properly. I think you need at least double the circumference of whatever sleeve you're sewing. So a regular slim style sleeve that you want to add shirring to, I think would not work. That's just my 2 cents. Now, what about when you want a fitted dress, a fitted bodice, but there's no zipper? That's where shirring comes into the mix a lot, and sometimes you have a panel at the back, sometimes on the sides, where that allows that stretch, and then you don't need a zipper. I think that is amazing. That is similar to this dress as well, because as you see there, it's quite a fitted waist and bodice, but I don't need a zipper to get in because that shirring is there at the back. So you can also have a panel right here, and I'm going to show you the example of the tempo dress from Love Notions. Now the same situation, I can't have that shirring elastic touching my skin, so I just did a little hack where I'm doing it double. So let's see. This is a piece I would need to cut out of fabric so I could do the shirring, and it would just be a single layer. I want to have a double layer of shirring just because I don't want the elastic touching my skin, and I think it will just be more stable that way. So I have a fold there, and I'm just going to have a piece that's twice as long like that, but it'll be the same width. So basically I'll just end up with a piece that's really long once it's shirred. And then I'm just going to fold it wrong sides together. I'll have a really neat fold on the top, but everything will be shirred there, and I'll have elastic there and elastic there. What's going to touch my skin is just going to be the fabric. Now for this tempo, I was doing the shirring not so close together. I was doing that about 1/2 inch apart. I was also eyeballing that. The reason I was doing it a little further apart was because the shirring was going to be double, so I didn't want that much elastic in there. And I knew it was still going to be stable, and it was still going to stretch and hold up and achieve its purpose. I think you can be a little relaxed, you know, if the pattern says do it at 3/8 or do it at 1/2 inch, you know, just pick the one that you like, it's still going to work. Remember, my shirring piece was double the length up here. So your normal shirring piece would be this long. It would have just been super wide like that. When you do your shirring, it becomes like that. But mine was long, and so I have a fold here, and then I've got right sides on both sides. You can see there, the elastic is in there. So I've got wrong side to wrong side, and I'll have fabric touching my skin on the inside. This is my cute tempo dress from Love Notions. This is a sundress, also fitted bodice. Skirt has a nice volume. And again, to get in, you just pull it on over your head. The only reason that is possible is because there's a shirred panel at the back instead of a zipper. It's just a small area in the center back that's going to give you that stretch, so you can easily just pull this dress on. I'll show you up closer. Now again, I don't want to touch that elastic thread, so I made my layer double here. And I actually do like it better than a single layer because it's more stable. So it's the way to go for me. If you find that the elastic is irritating on your skin, I don't know if it's just me, but I've heard it from other people, then you might want to try that. Now in the tempo dress that you just saw, there's also instructions to do mock shirring, which is a fake type of shirring. And that's helpful for everyone that absolutely loathes doing the shirring. The machine doesn't do it well. It's just not a good experience. You can do something similar with mock shirring, which is sewing a lot of channels and threading elastic through there. Let's see what this mock shirring is about. I'm going to show you this on a waistband that goes at the back. The original pattern had a flat front elasticated back feature. And you can do the same on a wider waistband as well, but the concept is the same. You sew channels, you put elastic through, you know, and then you sew on the ends, and that's it. Are going to be 1/2 inch just to give you wiggle space to put your elastic through. So you would be threading the elastic from one side to the other, and then this would already be gathered, and then we join it to the front waistband. We reinforce when we start and when we stop. From the fold here, I'm just going to measure 1/2 inch on my metal plate. If you want, you can draw this onto your fabric if that's easier. I'm using a large safety pin, and now I'm just going to pull these through one by one. So I have my 3/8 elastic that should fit nice and snug in this 1/2 inch channel. You never want to make your channel the same size as your elastic, or else it'll be the snuggest fit ever. Always try to make sure your elastic doesn't twist inside, so I'm always touching and checking. Once you get to the other side and your safety pin pokes out, I'm going to just put a pin to secure that. And then I'm just going to fiddle with the rest of the elastic here. Now, when I calculated my elastic, I did calculate it to end up a little longer because this always happens. Like, I'm never able to get the rest right in there. It just gets stuck on the fabric. So that is a practical thing that's going to happen sometimes when you do channels like this. So that's one done. And now we just need to repeat again. So take my elastic and thread through the second channel, then the third one. Then in the end, I'm just going to have a bunch of pins, and I'm just going to sew that so that it fixes the elastic in place. Super easy, as you can see. All of them are through. When you push out the safety pin from here, you can get right to the edge. Over here, I left that little bit hanging off. This one that I had a little bit extra, I was able to push it in a little bit more. You can see it's all done here. These are all just secured with pins. I'm just going to do a stitch close to the edge, smaller than the 3/8 seam allowance on both sides, and that will secure the elastics in place. That is the same technique that you would have done on the back panel on the tempo dress as well. lots of channels. My personal preference would be to use a 1/4 inch elastic because I can find better quality 1/4 inch elastic. In that case, I would do channels that are 3/8 of an inch wide. If you want to use 3/8 of an inch elastic, then your channels can be 1/2 an inch or 5/8 of an inch wide. Remember, everything is not super black and white. There's a little bit of leeway for you to choose. And anything that I mentioned here is going to work. Another place you can find shirring is on a waistband. I've actually seen pants that have shirring on the waistband all the way around. I've seen pants or skirts that have a flat front elasticated back, which is the feature I was sewing on the pattern that I was making. It's just on the back. And I like that you fold the waistband onto itself lengthwise, so you have double layer of fabric and then you do the shirring. I think it makes the waistband more stable that way. I think a single layer of shirring for a waistband would not be appropriate. So let's see how this is done. It's super, super easy. Now what you see here is the waistband folded lengthwise, wrong sides together. The raw edges here, I have quickly done a basting stitch just so that they don't move around or separate. And now from this folded edge here, we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch right here. That's a fold. What you're going to see next is all the shirring part. But if you don't want to do shirring, you can do mock shirring, which is something I have already shown. It's the same concept of sewing channels. So because we would use elastic that's 3/8 of an inch, we would want channels that are about 5/8 of an inch, so we have plenty of space to put the elastic through. When you're shirring just a single layer of fabric, you always want to have the right side of the fabric up so that the elastic thread ends up on the wrong side of the fabric. In this case, because the waistband has the right side of the fabric on both sides, it doesn't really matter which side you choose. So the side that you choose is just going to end up being the right side, and the one on the bottom is going to be the wrong side. Although both sides have the pretty side of the fabric because the wrong sides are touching. Okay, here is the back waistband. It shrunk quite a bit. It was very long. I think this is even smaller than half of the original length. And the shirring is right there. This is the side that has the regular thread. So this is the side that's going to go on the outside. This is the side that has the elastic thread at the back. This is going to be on the inside. I went ahead and gave it a press. I just get the iron and lift it, press, just throw a lot of steam on it, and it got even a little bit smaller. It's nice and firm, it'll hold up. This waistband was so easy to sew. I have about 7 rows of shirring here, about 3/8 of an inch apart, and it just went in beautifully to this garment. You can see the back there. It looks really pretty. I'm going to be tucking everything in, so the fact that the elastic is right there on the inner layer of the skirt doesn't really upset me because I am going to be tucking in. I'm not going to have this touching my skin just on its own ever, just because of the style of the garment. I know it's when I'm going to be tucking in something. One thing I could have done in this case, if I didn't want the elastic there, was instead of folding the waistband onto itself first and then shirring, I would have done all the shirring on the whole thing and then I folded it onto itself like I did with the tempo dress at the back. I would have done the exact same thing on this waistband if I didn't want that elastic to touch. Another option, one way it could have been done as well. I hope this was a helpful episode. Next time you see shirring come around in something that you want to sew, maybe you want to experiment and add your own shirring in some places discreetly, I would say just be careful because the original length of fabric you have can shrink a lot. That's why I mentioned don't just add it onto the bottom of sleeves if the sleeves are not wide enough originally, because it might end up strangling your wrists. And yeah, just play with sewing. You can always do that. You can always just take it apart if you don't like it. But it's a really nice feature when I do see it. And when I know it's going to work for me in where it is or if it's lined, there's always something I can do to make it work most of the time. That tropical green print with the black background thing, you're going to see in the next video with a full pattern review, so don't miss out. And I'll see you very soon because the next episode on this channel is coming very soon. Bye.